that's joined this evening. There's many I know who have perhaps already seen the earlier Webrecruit CV writing webinar. So welcome back to those. As far as this evening's concerned, a bit similar to last week's webinar. This is audio one-way only broadcast, so you should be able to hear me. That seems to be working fine, and you should be able to see the slides, of course, but I can't hear you however much you shout, and I can't see you however your equipment's set up. And therefore, if you want to ask any questions during this session, if you could just type them into the facility on the GoToWebinar toolbar, and then what happens is towards the end of the session, I will announce the end of the session formally, so to speak. Those that need to disappear can disappear. Those that want to listen to the answers of either their questions or the questions of others are more than welcome to hang on until I go through every question. Normally I try and deal with every single question that's been asked. And so if you're willing to endure that, you're more than welcome to hang on in there. But as I say, I will notify you when we've drawn to an end of the session proper for those that need to get on and do something else. I will be probably, the reason why, for those that joined earlier, and I sort of had a brief chuckle, somebody who will remain nameless suggested running a sweepstake on when this session will end, as it's timetable to run between 7:15 and 8:15. I'm pretty confident that the core bit of tonight's session will finish on or before 8:15, and therefore within the hour. The questions is a bit more random, depends how many have been asked, but the main session should be done within the hour. Only time will tell, as they say. Okay, so let's briefly just talk about what we're going to chat about this evening. Obviously the core subject is LinkedIn. The ingredients, if you like, or some of the messages you want to get across, it is important. What we're not really going to spend a great deal of time on, although if anybody's got any specific questions about the detailed technical nature of LinkedIn and some of the settings and bits and pieces, then fine. I'm not a technical expert, but I'll do my best to answer any questions. What tonight is all about, a bit like the message lurking behind the CV webinar for those people that have been on it, is how to make that profile that you might have set up a few months, years ago actually work for you, how to structure it so that it works in your best interest without necessarily having to become suddenly hugely participative in LinkedIn, and that's really important. Some people, and I have to imagine that we've got all sorts on these webinars, some people might not even have a profile yet. That's not necessarily a bad thing depending on what you're doing. Most people probably do have one, and most people probably have followed a particular route to get that profile. But some people have a strange sort of view, if they've not really dug into it themselves, about what it helps them do, what the threats are. They may get worried about having a profile and doing things on their profile. And we're going to try and remove some of those myths and deal with the realities. And one of the realities is that you don't have to be using LinkedIn like you might Facebook or Twitter. It's not that kind of instrument. It can be, but that won't prevent you from getting noticed if all you want to do is set up a profile and let it sit there for months or years at a stretch. So we'll go into some of that. We're going to talk about some of the different people who are on LinkedIn, who are using LinkedIn, and why that might be valuable for you. How to set out the content in a more effective way, particularly the headline and some of the introductory summary information, some things you shouldn't do, and how you can use LinkedIn to effectively find a job either now or increase your chances of finding a job, or build a profile for the future. And that's the other important thing. It's not just about the now. I'm sure some people online tonight may have a very immediate need to do something and get noticed and secure interviews and therefore jobs. But there are maybe others who are not that bothered about that right now, but for whom it might be useful just to make sure their profile's up to date, well structured, and creating the right image for people who might be keeping an eye on you, keeping tabs on you, if you like. Okay, so more of all of that later as we run through the session. In terms of briefly, and again, I will go through this briefly because there are some people who have seen this last week, so I do apologise for some of the duplication that will inevitably happen. Who on earth are we, first of all? You've been invited by Webrecruit to this evening's event. We're a partner with Webrecruit, a completely separate company, and that company is CV and Interview Advisors. We exist to provide CV writing, LinkedIn writing, interview coaching services to the masses. That's what we do day in, day out, and we partner with a number of people. Our team consists of a variety of folk who have been involved in career counselling, running businesses, recruiting, and I'm no exception to that rule. So the only reason I mention this stuff is because I just want to make sure that you understand that we're coming at this from a point of view of we know what goes on in the marketplace. We didn't just wake up one morning thinking it would be a good idea to do these webinars on a Wednesday evening occasionally. I've seen recruitment as an employer, working with an employer and recruiting people. I've been in the recruitment business, and I've worked in this business reviewing CVs, writing the occasional CV, LinkedIn profiles, etc., interview coaching. So, and we work across all sectors. There's not many that we haven't dealt with, from the very specialist to the very generic. And the importance of that is we see what goes on. We get the feedback from individuals, what they think of recruiters, what they think of employers, their experiences of going through job boards, LinkedIn, etc. And so we get a pretty good overview of what's going in the market at a particular time. We work with quite a lot of people, including Webrecruit, but also some chartered institutes, membership organisations, etc., who use our knowledge to leverage and give their memberships added value. And again, a bit of repetition for those that were on the CV webinar last week, but one thing that's important when you're writing a LinkedIn profile, your CV, or any message you're putting out to people that might want to employ you in the future, it's really important to know what the hot skills in the marketplace are at any given moment in time. They do evolve, they do change, they do develop, but if you don't know what they are, you're already on the back foot, because you need to align your message with whatever the target audience is expecting to see for their so-called ideal candidate. And if you know some of that stuff, it helps an awful lot. Bottom line is, we exist to write communications like the CV, like the LinkedIn profile, and ultimately how people can get their message across face-to-face in a more effective manner. And we know if you get that right, whether we're doing it, you're doing it, or anybody else does it, as long as it's being done properly, it makes a material difference. That much we know. I had some really nice feedback. There was a guy on the webinar last week for CV writing who has struggled, he may be on this evening actually, I've not checked, he's really struggled to get attention and interest. He put into practice some of the things we talked about, all of a sudden getting more interest. It's a bit early to tell whether it's going to result in anything, but it can make a difference. It's not just smoke and mirrors, it's not just me saying stuff. This stuff actually does make a fundamental difference to people's chances of securing interest, getting traction from people they really want to be noticed by. So enough about us. A brief bit about LinkedIn, because there are some myths and some people have a view on it, and I have to assume that there are all sorts of views tonight, so I'll try and deal with some of the core issues before we get into the meat of things. So what is LinkedIn? Well, it's a professional networking site. Probably most people know that. I think one of the key things to realise is it isn't and doesn't need to be used like an interactive social networking site like a Facebook or a Twitter or something like that. It's quite acceptable for people to set up a profile and then leave it. And it actually still works quite well for you. You don't need, if you don't particularly want to, or you don't have a particularly keen interest or desire or even the time to spend endless amounts of time trying to link and communicate with people. That's not a necessary requirement. In some cases it can help, more of which later, but materially you're quite well off if you've got a decent, well-structured profile that you never then went near again, as long as it's reflecting what your capabilities are at that moment in time. So it does accept that you need to update it, a bit like you'd update your CV, but you don't need to be in and out of LinkedIn every single day of the week if you don't want to. Its whole reason for being, although how they make the money, as we'll see later, and how that is important as far as you're concerned, we'll touch on later, has evolved over time, but its real main purpose is that it's there to connect people with professional interests. And that could be because you're a member of a particular group, association, club, and you're employed by a particular employer who belongs in a particular sector, and obviously you can connect with people that you've known from previous lives, current lives, or whatever. So it's there to just build and replicate, if you like, what people used to cart around in their briefcases, which would be a little folder, some people probably still have them, full of business cards. It sort of automates that process of getting to know people, connect people, and to leverage that information in a positive way. That's its sort of reason for being. It's very big. This number keeps on changing, and most of the time just keeps on heading up. It's gone from 0 to 200 odd million members very quickly worldwide. So it's a serious player. It gets real interest and traction. But one of the important things to realize about LinkedIn is it's not just about job seekers. Now, it depends, of course, how you're using it and how you've used it in the past. I guess a lot of people tend to use it to find jobs or to be noticed, and they've got that kind of mentality. It's a tool that helps me find opportunities. And, of course, that is one key use. It's used by all sorts of people for the purposes of recruitment, so that's fair enough. But there are lots of other reasons, and why this is important will become apparent very shortly. There are folk out there purely using it to do research into individuals, not necessarily for the purpose of recruiting, doing information, gathering information on people for reports, projects, assignments, investigative purposes for all I know, but there's all sorts of research being done out there. There, of course, are the recruiters and hiring managers doing digging from their own point of view to find out who might be out there of interest. So it's sort of the other side of the table from you who might be looking for companies to appeal to and apply to. There are entrepreneurs out there trying to showcase and grow their own businesses, products, services, get ideas, maybe even raise funding. And there are, if you're in sales or any kind of commercial line of work, buying, sales, product development, there are people out there actively using it to track down folk that might be interested in their products and services, and using that as a bit like the letter, the email, or the introductory phone call of the not so recent or recent past. It's a replacement or a supplement to other ways of prospecting and business development. Now, this quote actually came from BBC website last week, because it's linked to something that I'll show you later about an acquisition that LinkedIn made of its own. But what a lot of people don't realize is that now LinkedIn makes most of its money from selling its services to recruiters, who then, of course, are using it to find people, hopefully, like you. And that's really important because it shows you the shift. So a lot of websites exist to raise money from advertising. So Facebook and Twitter, presumably, most of their revenues are coming from that kind of activity. And LinkedIn's a bit different now. Most of its money is coming from commercial subscriptions, and a lot of that's coming from recruitment. The majority of it is coming from recruitment. And so that is really important if you're in the market to use LinkedIn to help secure a job. So important, in fact, that as you can notice on the red comment down the bottom of this page, almost to say last year, it's not last year now, it's the year before last, but 2012, more people found a job through LinkedIn than they did the biggest job board of them all, monster.com, and LinkedIn would seem to be making that the core part of their business over and above the basic functionality of networking. As far as generating money is concerned, all of their messages seem to be, let us find a way of getting employers and recruiters to find talent and earn some money out of it. So if that's the case and you're using it for job seeking, and it may be that you're not actually actively looking to job seek at the moment, so take from this bits that are relevant, bits that aren't so relevant, but always have a mind to the future. You, of course, can use LinkedIn to search for jobs, and many of you might have done that. You might have applied for jobs that you saw solely through LinkedIn, and that's one use, of course, you can make of it. And therefore, you need to be thinking, okay, well, if that's what I'm going to be using it for, obviously there's going to be a reciprocation. People are going to be looking at your profile and taking a message from it. And so the message I'm trying to send you is have in mind now what message you've got on your LinkedIn profile. And crudely, if it's just a dump of your CV, and we'll touch on this later, if your CV, and if you were on the session last week, you've probably got an idea now as to whether you think your CV is up to mark or not. And if it isn't, and all you're doing is replicating that message on your LinkedIn profile, then as soon as you start leveraging that profile and making it work and connecting with people, and people start finding you and looking for you and looking for the skills that people like you have got, it's not going to look so clever if your profile is not really saying the right kind of stuff. You can, of course, use LinkedIn from your point of view to search for companies you might be interested in targeting yourself. So now there's an increasing amount of evidence that individuals are taking it upon themselves to find out what kind of employers might be in the marketplace if they don't already know them, do a bit of digging, who works there, who can I find out maybe some background information from, and either use that before an interview or use that before an approach to the company on a speculative basis. And there are plenty of folk there who found that a very successful route to go down because it avoids going through a third party, namely and principally a recruiter, who may not view the information in the same way. And that's all fine and dandy, but again, lurking behind this is what message have you got to then send. It's all right applying and doing a lot of that legwork and trying to appeal to a target audience directly, but it'll only go so far if when somebody then takes a look at you, they don't like what they see. You can, of course, search for people that you might want to make a decision on you, add them to your network. Again, then it implies that they're going to see pretty soon what you've got to offer, and if that message isn't clear, you're not helping yourself. And you can use the power of LinkedIn's network to find other contacts and get introduced to them. So depending on the level of account that you have, a basic or a premium or any of the other enhanced packages, allows you access to certain levels of contacts within LinkedIn. Those who've got a profile will know that already. And depending on the level of your membership will depend on how many people you can see a certain level beyond you. But nearly everybody can use their network to get contacts and then see their contacts, and that might reveal some interesting information about who you might want to be talking with. In terms of your activity, if you want to participate and increase the level of proactivity, if you like, regarding your LinkedIn profile, then it certainly makes sense to participate in discussions within groups that exist. So many of you might have joined groups if you've got a profile. That helps in its own right to build awareness and a profile, and then within that you can provide expertise if you've got particular expertise, answering questions or asking questions of certain people, and again that all generates traction and interest in your profile. But that is an optional extra. You don't have to be that active if you don't want to, but a lot of people do use that facility to build knowledge before they go into the job market. And of course you can narrow the focus and focus and get down to who the hiring managers may be, where they would expect to be, and start to make contact with them. But the prime aim, of course, behind your profile for most people, and this is why you don't have to be so active in the marketplace, is that principally if your profile is well structured, has the right message, and is coded in the right way by using some of the means that people will search for you, more of which later, it allows you to be found. You don't have to be super active, you don't have to be proactive necessarily to be found by people. And so most people imagine that their profile will attract interest. You might already have experience of this, you might have evidence of it, people ringing you or trying to connect with you and link with you, sending you emails if you've allowed that to happen. And of course you will be found if either by pure luck, if that works, so be it, or because your profile is saying the right things and people like the message and they want to try and find out more about you. And so given that background, one of the things, as I hinted at earlier, that LinkedIn have recently done, in fact last Thursday, I think it was, as opposed to Thursday prior. They've just bought a company which uses algorithms, and lots of companies seem to exist these days, and their specialism seems to be this sort of rather dark art of writing algorithms to do things. But some companies just earned itself a whole heap of money, or its owners have, to provide LinkedIn with expertise to match job candidates with employers. Now, they spent $120 million on this company to do that. It only reinforces the fact that LinkedIn's direction is all about how can we make money out of the swiftest possible link between those who are looking for talent and those that have the talent, and then get some money from it. And there are a lot of people in the recruitment world who are quite worried about this, because LinkedIn's gradually encroached on a marketplace that for some time has been occupied by lots of job boards, lots of recruiters. And of course, if you're an employer with an eye to the purse, and you've got a LinkedIn account, basic or probably premium or some kind of subscription service with LinkedIn directly, guess what? They've been using that, making that asset sweat, and doing a bit of recruitment themselves. And LinkedIn have been making a lot of money out of that. So a lot of MDs, CEOs, founders of businesses, HR departments, HR teams, internal recruiters of employers, busy away searching for folk to see if they can recruit. Sometimes it is genuinely because they want to save a few quid on recruiting fees. Sometimes it's because it's just a good way of keeping in touch with the marketplace and people like you. But it just points to the fact that LinkedIn is going to become even more important to the process of getting noticed, identified, and selected for potential interviews. And there's quite a few people who've gotten jobs that were never advertised as a consequence of people using LinkedIn, because the employer might have said, okay, let's try and cut to the chase. There's people on LinkedIn. Let's see if we can engage with them. If we find somebody good there, job done. Downside is, of course, it makes it even harder to assess who's successful out there and who isn't, because you may never have known that opportunity existed. The person getting the job offer and maybe one or two others who got interviewed will know that that happened. So it all really focuses on the fact that you need to make sure that that message that you've got on your profile is not only the right message, but the mechanisms lurking behind that message are getting you noticed in the first place, so that you appear in searches, and that when people then read your profile, they like what they see, are encouraged to do something. A bit like your CV. It's all about getting your message to the right person, for them to interpret it in the right way, and then for them to actually do something, the call to action for them to actually progress your application. It's just another version of that. So, with all that in mind, how should you write your profile, and what should you be doing to make it more effective for you? Well, as I hinted at earlier, what people tend to do, and in most cases I have to say is the wrong approach, is that they use, but understandable, is that they use their current CV as the foundation. And a lot of people, because LinkedIn makes it easy, they will hoover in a CV, pass the data, fill out some fields, and people think job done. And if you think a good LinkedIn profile can be sort of created from 5 minutes on a Sunday afternoon, just hoovering in your CV and then leaving it, then it's highly unlikely that's a great strategy. Some people, if they've got a really good CV, might just get away with it, in fairness. But for most people don't have a good CV, and therefore most people just using that as a platform for their LinkedIn profile are already missing a trick. So it does sort of beg the question, is your CV effective? Now, for those that attended last week's webinar or any of our previous webinars on CVs, I'm not going to go into as much detail about this, but if you're not really sure how your CV is or might perform, well, then if you've got the stats about how many interviews it gets you when you apply for jobs, that will give you a really good clue. And unsurprisingly, if you're not getting many interviews when you're applying for jobs you know you could perform, then that would indicate that the CV's got some problems. Very unlikely to do with anything that you personally have got to offer, because most people who are receiving your CV wouldn't know you from Adam. So if you've got those stats, you can at least make an educated guess as to whether your CV is doing its job or not. And then if you've just replicated that on your LinkedIn profile, it would indicate your LinkedIn profile is not doing its job either, and therefore you need to do something about that. If you are getting lots of interviews with your CV, then you should, in theory, if you're using your CV as the base for your LinkedIn profile, it shouldn't really be causing you any problems. It would be strange if there was any evidence to suggest you weren't getting interest once people hit your profile. But it is important to realise that the two go hand in hand. If you get an interview with your CV, it's very likely that somebody's going to check you out on LinkedIn. In truth, it's probably highly likely they'll check you out in all sorts of other ways as well. So beyond the scope of this evening, and something we don't really get that involved with because it is more personal, but if you've got a trail of stuff on Facebook and Twitter that contradicts any other message you're sending, that's something to be very wary of, because some employers will do a lot of digging into you before they interview folk. They won't do it at the filtering stage, they'll do it for the people they've decided that they might interview. And either before they interview you or at some stage shortly afterwards, there'll be somebody doing a bit of digging just to see if they can spot anything obvious. And a fair few people have fallen foul of that because of strange things they've been up to which they thought were private, but turned out not to be so. So LinkedIn's slightly different because very few people have a LinkedIn profile that's dodgy in the sense of some kind of personal thing. It's more likely that their message is just wrong, or there are disconnects. So your CV's saying one thing, like a date or a time or an employer, and just LinkedIn profile's not quite replicating the same detail, and so people could look at it and say, it's not, there's something not quite right here, and that could be the reason that they then reject. So do some analysis, do some stats if you can, and ask yourself the question, is my CV a good standard right now? If you're using that as a platform, and you're probably, most important thing still probably is the CV in the recruitment process, then most people start with that and then move on to LinkedIn. This, again, most important message really lurking behind this, both for CV and LinkedIn profile, is that you have to present to your target audience a strong business case as to why somebody should hire you. So it isn't about having a list of things on your CV. So I've made this point in previous webinars about if you've just got a list of jobs, responsibilities, duties, hobbies, interests, and all you're doing is presenting that rather anodyne information to your audience, that's not helping your cause. It's not building a case. It's not justifying why somebody should be spending a few £1,000s on you every year. So you've got to flip it around and think, okay, what's the audience looking for? So it helps if you know what they're looking for. Look into your toolkit of skills and abilities, and then write something, some content that matches the two. So in effect, in an ideal world, your target audience, your potential employer, has spec'd out a job and sort of desirable essential characteristics, and the ideal world, of course, is that when they read your material, be that CV, LinkedIn profile or whatever, they're getting a feeling that you're a pretty close match to that set of requirements. Now, you can't always get it that close, of course, but you can give a pretty strong indicator, and I guarantee if you spend enough time and effort on it, you'll get so much closer than the vast majority of people. You'll be in the upper quartile of applicants without any doubt at all if you get the job done properly. So I started saying earlier that if you think on a Sunday afternoon you can just spend a few moments building your LinkedIn profile, that just isn't going to work. It takes a lot of time to do this properly, as you'll soon see, and it's just like approaching the CV from scratch. Is the CV presenting a business case to your audience? Yes or no? Do you have the stats to prove whether that's working or not? Yes or no? And if you keep getting no's or poor responses, and all you're doing is then replicating the content from your CV on your LinkedIn profile, I can virtually guarantee it's not helping your cause. It's not going to make any difference. It might be neutral at best to your chances, but it might actually be harming you. So good CV, good LinkedIn profile is something that represents a strong business case to your target audience, and if you get that sorted, you'll be a long way to making a big difference. So looking at LinkedIn and how that works, and trying to think about how we would structure the profile to make a stronger business case, the very first thing we should start with is the professional headline. Now, I will just show you on on screen now. I'll just wait for it to refresh. So most of you should be able to see now. Matt's the guy that runs our business. So typical LinkedIn profile, name, photo, more on that subject later. And then the bit of text that appears under Matt's name is what's called the professional headline. Now, that's important because a lot of people go with what LinkedIn defaults to and thinking that that saves them a bit of time and effort, which is, it's not fatal. Well, actually, for some people it is fatal, because if you've got a strange job title or working for a company that means nothing to nobody or very few people, the default setting is some combination of your current job title or most recent job title and your employer. And that doesn't really add a lot of value. That's not telling the world what you're capable of doing. So you'll notice Matt, although he's stating that he is an MD, he's actually describing the value he can add to his target audience, which are people potentially like some of you on tonight's session and lots of other folk out there in the marketplace. He can help people be more successful in the job market. That's his value proposition. So that professional headline is a bit of text that appears under your name, and there is a limit. I think it's 120 characters including spaces, so you can't write War and Peace under there, nor would you want to anyway, but it is tight. You have to be very ruthless with the text. But it should be what you've got to offer the world, and within a relatively small space. Now, if you don't know what you have to offer the world, of course that represents a little bit of a problem, but it means you just need to think about it, which is why this stuff is not the work of 5 minutes on the Sunday afternoon, because if you don't know this already, you're going to have to spend some time figuring it out. But it's what is the core reason you exist? What value could you bring? Why would your employer sink X number of £1,000s every month or year into you as an individual? What are you offering in return? It's that kind of message you need to reflect back. As I say, don't leave as LinkedIn's default setting. When you, for those of you who've set up a profile or you've shifted job recently, the default setting is what you're offered when you put in your most recent or current employment. And there's a little tick box, and it says something like, would you like to use this information for your professional headline? And most people tick yes, because they think, great, LinkedIn's going to do it for me. One less thing for me to have to worry about. That must be the smart thing to do. I'll leave the box ticked, move on. And it's, in some people's cases, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. Because if you've got a strange job title, or if you work for an organisation, as I indicated, people don't really know exists, all you're doing is making a statement that people don't take any value from at all. Particularly if your job title is not representative of what you'd like to be doing in the future, or you're pitching for jobs that are some way different from that job title. As soon as people look at your profile, all they're going to see is a message that they don't really want to see. So be very careful about what you've got in that professional headline. And one thing that some people put, which I would certainly not recommend, is anything that implies desperation, i.e. currently seeking or actively seeking, or even sometimes, please call, I'm available now, or available immediately. It's not the right sentiment. However you feel about your circumstances, and however desperate you may actually be to secure some kind of interest or employment, that message doesn't sit well with people when they see a profile, and it can actually disengage people from the process and you personally. So here's an example on the screen, which some of you may have read already, but it's just an example of if this finance director, mythical person that we're mentioning in this particular professional headline, if they are a finance director and they worked for Joe Bloggs PLC, by default, LinkedIn would put under their name Finance Director with Joe Bloggs PLC. Okay, that may not be the worst crime of the century, in fairness, if they're going for other Finance Director roles. At least it's stating what they are. But if this Finance Director wanted to become an MD, or indeed they wanted to do something completely different, and they knew it would be a challenge to make that move, telling people you're an FD when you don't really want to be is not very helpful, and if nobody knows who Joe Bloggs PLC is, not very helpful either. Or if whoever this FD's company or employer is is in the press for the wrong reasons or has a negative perception, and there are plenty of those organisations out there, you don't know what the reader is going to be thinking, but it's highly unlikely to be a positive thought. So you need to be very careful with the message that you're putting on even just this opening professional headline. So it's 120 characters only, maximum, but it can make or break some people's chances of getting an interview. It's that brutal sometimes. So that's the first thing to change and influence. The second thing, again, reflecting the, I'm just going to go back one there. I don't want people reading that all yet. The second thing, underneath your name, an opening kind of blurb about what you are, your professional headline, your photo, is the summary area. So again, just very briefly, I'll show you Matt's profile, just to show you the section. So towards the bottom of the screen, you can see with the headline background, you've got a summary statement. It's a bit like people have on their CV, which is an opening. A lot of people call it a professional profile or a personal profile. Now, with LinkedIn, it's called summary, and that's it, end of. On your CV, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but the content, just as on your CV, is really important. So if you've made a statement underneath your name in your professional headline that you are, let's take that finance director case as an example, a finance director with an ability to do a certain few things and to add some value, you need to back that up in this summary. You need to quickly stake a claim on the expertise that you have and the value you could add to your potential employer. And so for those that attended the CV writing webinar, you'll know that we were talking about that opening statement needs to make it clear what you are, generically or otherwise, what do you do, and what are you good at. And it's fairly straightforward. And here's an example. Again, it's for this mythical finance director. I think it's actually the same text for those that saw the CV webinar last week. With a slight difference, you'll notice we're using the word I. Now, for those that were on last week, I went on at some length about the tense that you use and the writing style. It differs, and this is important, it differs between your CV and the LinkedIn profile. The CV is a more active document, and we avoid references to I or the named individual, whereas LinkedIn is more personal, and it suits it better if you do say, I am this, I am that. You don't refer to yourself by your own name, but do write from your own perspective. It's a subtle difference, but it's just one of those things that just reads and works better. So this is another reason why just copying what you've got on your CV across the LinkedIn profile is not the ideal or the best practice, if you like. It's subtly different. But for those who have already read this opening paragraph, again, the important thing is describing what the person is, it's describing where they can add value, what they're good at. To any person looking for a finance director, it would make sense and appear to be relevant. So 2 areas which you can already make a difference to your profile. Now, for a lot of people, this will be enough to make a fundamental difference as to whether they are proceeded with or not further into the application or generating interest or a call to action. Just getting these 2 bits right can make or break the chances of getting further into the process. We're going to come on to the other bits of content that are important and some of the other bits and pieces shortly. But what I wanted to do is just have a brief break, from your point of view anyway, in terms of dealing with one of the most often asked questions, which is what on earth can we do and how can we help? So if I deal with this now, it may save people asking this question later, and you can leave earlier. As I'll probably repeat later, there's a couple of things that are probably coming through loud and strong now, which is that if you've any doubt about the quality of information you're sending out to the marketplace, or you suspect it will be a problem in the future without taking some action, then you probably have gathered that A, you'll know where those problems are, and B, you'll be thinking, okay, well, either I'm capable of doing this and making these changes, and it will have a material effect, I can almost guarantee that, or I'm not, and I don't know what to do. Well, I suppose one of the things that obviously we're here to do is to provide that help for those that need it. So what we tend to find is there's people that fit into 3 camps after and during these webinars. There's people that either genuinely don't need any help. They've got the stats, they're getting the interviews, they're rare in fairness, but everything's okay, and they can just move on and should find a job and won't suffer any problems in securing interest in what they've got to offer the world. Also within that sort of camp, at the other end of the extreme, the people that think they don't need to do anything, and there's no changing. You have to get over a particular hurdle, which is, do I need to do anything or not? The other 2 camps are either you know you need to do something because you've got the stats to prove it, or you fear that the stats won't work well for you and you won't get the interest and level of interviews you'd like. So you think, I've got to do something, and you might be able to do something yourself, and you have the competence and ability to fix it yourself, and that's perfectly possible, so that's fine. And what you've learned, if you attended last week's webinar in combination with tonight, should be enough to get you on the right track, make a big difference. Then the third camp, of course, is for people who think, okay, I need to do something first of all, recognise that, but I also recognise it's not for me, I can't do this, I either haven't got the time, I can't be inclined to do it, and I need help. And if you fall into that camp, then people like us can help you. And if you're interested in that, then obviously our strength is to put people through a process that will establish how we can help and what needs to be done. Now, I'm just going to sort of combine the 2, CV and LinkedIn, because most people come to us and say, look, I need both sorting. We can sort either or, but for most people it's both at the same time. And if we're going to do that, as I indicated, it's not the work of a moment. We have to get to know the people we're working for. So our clients, we spend a couple of hours with them assessing what they've got in their toolkit, if you like, the raw data. We have to spend a bit of time clarifying whether the objectives you have are actually sane and realistic, and if they are, of course, then we can help you. We can help you work out what your value proposition is. So it's a bit of a cliche, I know, but it's important that you understand where your value exists and how people will see that in today's marketplace. We can help you with that. And then we can work out where and how to write that content. Now, in the case of LinkedIn, for those that are bothered about privacy and making changes to their profile, hopefully for the reasons I discussed earlier, there are lots of people using LinkedIn for lots of reasons. Being on LinkedIn doesn't necessarily mean you're looking for a job, but you can turn off the facility in LinkedIn that broadcasts to the world every single change you make in your life. So for those of you that have already got a profile and work with lots of people with lots of profiles in their own right, and get this continual stream of email saying, you know, Joe Bloggs has changed job, Joe Bloggs have been here for a year, and all they've done is maybe change the spelling of something on their job title, or they might genuinely have moved. You can turn all of that off. And we do that when we go in and make changes to our clients' profiles. It will not remove your ability to be searched and visible to the world, but it will stop people from seeing that changes have been made automatically. Of course, if anybody stumbles across your profile and looks at it, of course they'll see the changes as they are live. But you can reduce the amount of communication generated by changes to your own profile. Most people have that switched on by default, and a lot of people don't even realize you can turn it off, but you can. Likewise, you can choose what kind of emails you receive. There's a lot of functionality lurking in the system, which we will set for people on a one-to-one basis. So it depends on what tolerance you have of receiving emails, what kind of communications you want to receive. All of that can be fine-tuned, and we'll take care of all of that. So if you're starting to think, okay, well, that might be of interest, and it might be worth considering, right at the end of the session, we got some great deals. Those that attended last week's webinar will know them already, but that make the financial pain, because I'm afraid that does cost money, a little bit easier to swallow. Okay, in terms of stages of the profile we've got to so far, so we've described how to write a more powerful professional headline. We've discussed the fact that that opening summary needs to contain the what are you, what value can you add, what are you good at in a statement of some sort. Then there's the business of who do you work for and what jobs have you done. Now, bottom of this slide, remember, a reminder, you're trying to build a business case as to why somebody should hire you. So again, just dumping what you've got from your CV is not necessarily the wisest thing to do. So when we're writing LinkedIn profiles, as far as the jobs that you've done and the positions that you've held, it's just a summary. Again, in an ideal world, you want people to visit your profile, see enough to think this person looks interesting, but the psychology of LinkedIn is such that you ought not to be presenting a desperate message to the world, which is, yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, or I'm available, please contact me, here are all the ways that you can contact me. That's not how you want to play it. And I stress that this is an ideal world. We can't legislate for how people use it and how people respond. But the way that it works best is when somebody finds your profile for whatever reason, but let's assume it's to do with a job and a position and a vacancy. They see your profile, and it doesn't matter whether you're a contractor, interim, or permanent. They're looking at it and thinking, this person seems to be right. There's enough for me to feel warm and comfortable and fuzzy about this individual. I really hope they're going to be interested in what I have to tell them, that person being the recruiter or hiring manager. Rather than they see everything about you, everything under the sun about you, can actually then make a decision on whether to connect with you or not. Obviously, if they decide not to see you, you might never know anything about it. Or your worst case is you'll see that somebody's looked at your profile, but you'll not know why, and you'll only be left to imagine. Or they might spot something they don't like, assume too much, and still not bother to contact you. So there's a fine line. It's almost like an advertisement. You really want somebody to be intrigued enough to want to do something, but they've not got all the information to put together for them to make the ultimate decision. It's almost, ideally, they want to have to engage with you to find out more, and then you gain a little bit more control than you might otherwise have had. So for that reason, we say don't put warts and all about all of your jobs in lots of detail. It's just not relevant. You want just a summary. Generally speaking, that means you don't have lists and lists of bullet points. You might have a few to make it look tidy, but broadly, you just want a brief summary. What were you there to do? Maybe something about your KPIs and of course, some achievements within each role, but not lots and lots of detail. And as far as the number of jobs or amount of information to give, a bit like with the CV. So again, for those that weren't on last week, if your CV, if you've got a career that goes back into the 90s or even the 80s or the 70s, and you're detailing all of that on your CV, it really ought not to be replicating that in your LinkedIn profile. It has a most hideous effect. So there's no obligation on LinkedIn to mention anything in any particular way. You're not obliged to give the same level of information. So again, replicating your CV doesn't help your cause if you've got a decent length of career. You can get over that authority and the gravitas in other ways, but by listing everything you've done since leaving school is not a wise move. So we tend to detail just the last 8 to 10 years and make sure that's kept up to date, and make sure you trim it every year or so at least, so that you're always presenting that horizon, that window to people. Now, it depends. If you've got quite a few jobs in that, particularly if you're a contractor or an interim worker, then you might want to review that. So we tend to say either the last 8 to 10 years or the last 4 jobs as a rough indicator. Now, again, if we're involved in the process, we take a case-by-case view on this, but as a broad indicator, that's the amount of detail you want to be giving, no more. And then probably the biggest thing that people miss on their profile, and some people still don't even know it exists, is an area called projects. Now, projects is a really useful tool. say not many people use it, but if you've got, again, if we've written your CV, we'll, and as you'll know from the last week's webinar, we'll have created for you a handful of career highlights, as we call them, evidence of your success, proof that you can do real-life things that are of value to your target audience. Now, on the CV, you're limited, just because of space and a few other technical reasons that some of you may remember, to probably 3 career highlights on the CV. LinkedIn, within reason, there are no real limits. You can have lots of projects, and they work really well, and they're an area where you can showcase these career highlights to back up your expertise in a given area or your ability to perform some kind of competence. Now, again, so this is a bit of repetition for those on last week, but there's a methodology we use to write these projects, and it's called the STAR methodology, which stands for Situation, Task, Actions, Results. All we're looking to do really here is to provide whoever's looking at the profile with real-life examples of work that you've done. So most people's profiles are a list, as I said earlier. They have their name, they have a bit of a summary, and then they have their employment history or experience, as LinkedIn calls it, and all that's listed is a number of jobs, and if you're lucky, maybe some text saying a few things. Now, the trouble with that is, of course, not much evidence lurks within the jobs to prove that you've got a competence. You might well have used jargon that is only common within your own employer. You may have made reference to achievements but not really substantiated them or explained them to anybody. So it's very hard for the reader to assess what you're really capable of, and you may have assumed a whole truckload of stuff that the reader will not interpret in the same way. So when we write these career highlights on the CV and then convert them into projects as far as LinkedIn is concerned, we use this methodology to be able to pull together really nice, concise paragraphs, in effect, explaining stuff that you've done. And if you just read the example on the screen, beginning ERAC, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, that stands for, it's an example actually off Matt's CV. And it's split up into a number of sections. So the first sentence is the situation, and it's describing that Enterprise Rent-A-Car acquired an unprofitable competitor that needed sorting out, basically. That's the situation. It's the scene setter, if you like. The task is the next sentence, and so Matt was appointed as operations manager to rebrand the business, blah, 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 blah. And then the bulk of the remainder of the text are the actions that Matt took as operations manager to effect change. And then the final sentence is the result, and that is quite impactful because he succeeded in achieving a certain level of profitability within a fairly tight time scale. So that text can be taken across to LinkedIn, form a project. Projects are linked to chunks of employment and are flagged as such. So they're visible in their own entity, in their own right on LinkedIn profile, but they also could be linked to a period of your employment and will appear linked to that period of employment. And so people can click on them. So they're viewed and visible in 2 completely different ways. They're either there right in front of your face, or when somebody's looking at a particular spell of employment and they see that there's a project linked to that spell of employment, they can click on that and they'll be presented with the very same information. And if you get this right, it's really good evidence to say, look, I've just made these claims about what I'm able to deliver. This is the value I have to offer. Here's the proof. As I say, most people never use this section, but it's really worth using. And to find it, if you go into your LinkedIn profile and edit it, on the right-hand side, there is a whole section where there's things like certifications, education, secondary education, training and development, and then there's a box marked projects. And if you click on that and then just follow the instructions, you can put a heading, you can link it to employment, you can put dates if you want to, but you're not obliged to, and then you put the body of text. And it's a really good way, as I say, of providing evidence to your audience as to your abilities. Okay, a few other things to talk about as far as the profile is concerned, but what we've covered there are the main things that make the biggest difference to how people react when they see a profile. So it's, you get your professional headline sorted. It's not a game changer, in fairness, unless you're working with an obscure title, with an obscure company, both, or you're trying to do something completely different from that inferred by your current job title or most recent job title. In those circumstances, getting that professional headline wrong can actually make a big difference. Just remember, just as people look at lots of CVs for lots of job applicants, tends to be people searching for folk on LinkedIn, because there are so many people on LinkedIn, you will be treated in those first filtering stages a bit quickly, robustly, if you wanted to use a political word, but people will probably look very quickly, is this right? Does this look right to me? If your professional headline just sends the wrong message straight away, chances are somebody might just hit the next button. So you get that right, that helps. The summary, critical, because it sets the scene, gives people a little bit more meat on the bone. If you get that sentiment right, people, again, feel nice and warm and comfortable about you as a potential candidate. And then if you then provide a little bit of information about your jobs, where you've been working, but importantly to provide the evidence of success through projects, you're building a strong business case as to why somebody should hire you. Now, the comment in red at the bottom of this current slide is important, again replicated from last week I'm afraid, but it really reflects the fact that once you've got past the first hurdle, so in the traditional sense you apply for a job, the CV is the only means at which the people recruiting can judge you across the first hurdle, if you like. But once they've made a decision on who to interview, chances are, if they haven't done already, they'll check you out on LinkedIn. Now, it's not quite at the stage where if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you've sort of put a nail in your own coffin. It's not quite that blunt. It might raise somebody's eyebrows, but I don't think there's ever any evidence to say that you're definitely not going to get any further, if your CV is strong enough, that is. But it's certainly the case is if your LinkedIn profile deviates in any way from the message that obviously they've reacted to positively from your CV, you could lose it at this stage. And there is evidence of that. And you could certainly lose it if through other social networking sites you've made some errors, then that could be the nail in the coffin. But again, that's out with tonight's session. So it really does point to the fact that you need to have a strong CV, of course, to get partway through the process, but you need to make sure that if you've got a LinkedIn profile, it's working for you rather than against you. Some other bits and pieces. If you're connecting with people and you have the option, do you know this person, have you worked with them? For those that have a LinkedIn profile, you'll be familiar with this. You have to give a reason for why you want to connect with this person. How did you know them? And then there's a little area where you can put a message in. Overwrite the default setting because it looks impersonal and as if you couldn't be bothered, particularly if you're targeting people that you might need to think positively of you. So with a friend, a colleague, somebody in your peer group, that's less of a problem. But if you're targeting a hiring manager, a recruiter, somebody that might be in the position to hire you or consider you in the future, make sure you personalize that message. Don't go with the default setting because it looks like you couldn't be bothered. And for some people, that will just send the wrong message. There is a section in LinkedIn, Skills Expertise, which for many will be familiar with because you get the little photograph of somebody who's recommended you for a particular area of skills and expertise, and you can pre-select what those skill areas are. I think you get up to 50. There are things like project management, communication skills, certain technical skills like Excel, and you can build up a profile of skills within your LinkedIn profile. Make sure you use those because they matter a whole heap as far as being searched and identified by people doing searches for you. Don't worry too much about being endorsed for those skills. Make sure the skills are in your profile. If you're in a position where you can recommend people, that is a good thing to be doing, but not just for the sake of it. Done properly, you'll land up in a situation where it's just a bit like lots of websites. You link to people, it helps you build your profile, etc., etc. So it's like a snowball gathering snow as it rolls down the mountain. So get in the habit. If you're in a position where you can genuinely recommend people for a job well done, that's a good thing to do. But don't do it for, again, peer groups and people that you sort of meet down the pub occasionally because that will show through. To gain credibility, and particularly if you're trying to justify why you should be capable of doing a particular job, and particularly if that job's a bit of a stretch or a slight tangential move, join groups on LinkedIn that support that interest or career objective, because that will reflect well. So, for example, if you've just taken an interest in project management, join groups that are relevant to the skills of a project manager, or project management groups, or recruiters that specialize in project management, because it makes people think, yeah, they're taking this seriously. If you claim on your CV to be passionate, or anywhere, a covering letter, for example, to be passionately interested in this, that, and the other, because you think it's the right thing to say, yet somebody goes to your LinkedIn profile and thinks, well, there's all these groups they could be a member of, but they're clearly not, so how passionate are they? There's a disconnect. It's a reason why people might feel slightly less positive about you. If appropriate, with those groups, build a presence, if you like, by participating in them. As I say, it's an optional extra. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, or if it's not your kind of thing. But to help build a profile and connections, it could be useful to actually participate in the discussions. Depends on what your objective is. If you get recommended by people, I would encourage seeking recommendations, but again, pretty much only from people who've employed you, managed you, or recruited you. They're quite useful. So if they're from authoritative figures, credible figures, it makes a big difference. And recommendations on your LinkedIn profile add a lot of weight. There is a stat that you're 3 times more likely to be noticed and selected for interview if you've got compelling recommendations. That's why we add them to our CVs that we write. For those that were on last week, you'll remember that. Again, as a technical feature, again, out with tonight really in terms of detail, but for those of you who've got a profile and you put the link, your URL on your CV, you'll notice that for some people it's a sort of a blah, 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 linkedin.com / and then a whole garbled heap of numbers and letters. You can actually overwrite that if it's available and create a vanity URL, if you like, something that's more close to your name or meaningful. Could be worthwhile doing. Makes it just easier to remember you and find you. Quite a few people have asked recently, continue to ask, whether having a photograph on your profile is a good thing or not. Generally, and this is a generalization, we're running out of time because I've already overstepped my 8:15 by a couple of minutes, so we are close to finishing, by the way. But if you're not bothered, if you don't really mind whether people see you or not, generally speaking, it's now best practice to put a photograph on. It's just more personable. It's what people expect. It's the done thing by and large. But there's still a lot of people that don't have photographs on there, and there are quite a few people who don't want to have their photographs on there. And I wouldn't say that that's a problem necessarily. There is a strong argument to say for some people who've asked questions at these webinars, you know, is there a case that it could be used as discrimination? And of course that is sadly a factor for all sorts of reasons, which you and I will probably never know about, unfortunately, but probably could surmise go on. So it is a sensitive area, and I'd say if you're bothered by it, don't feel forced to put a photograph on your profile. If you're not bothered by it, do it. Any questions about that, please ask away and we'll deal with them later. And finally, the LinkedIn profile itself is not fixed, it's quite dynamic. It operates on a drag and drop philosophy. So if you've ever messed around with it yourselves and you know this, then great. If you haven't, the main sections in default setting are okay, i.e. you can't do anything about where your name and professional headline appear, but you can do pretty much everything else in terms of positioning that you'd want. It makes sense to keep the summary high up, just under your name and professional headline. When we put projects in our LinkedIn profiles for our clients, we tend to make sure they appear pretty high up the batting order, whereas by default they go to the bottom of LinkedIn. You don't want them at the bottom. And the way you drag and drop it is if you ever go in and edit your profile, to the right-hand side of any section, so for example, summary, skills and expertise, or projects, to the right-hand side of that particular section, there's an arrow ahead. I think it's got up and a down arrow, and you just grab hold of that, and you can reposition the whole section automatically. It depends who you are, what you're trying to do, what your experience is, how much career history you've got, how many projects you've got, as to which order is best. So that's something we sort out with the individuals, but it's definitely worth playing around with. Okay, so almost done now. Just to reiterate, though, I think hopefully what you'll have gathered from this evening is that just as I had mentioned with the CV situation last week, and we'll go on and on about, there's a number of things you sort of need to self-diagnose before doing anything. First of all is, do you actually need to do anything at all with your CV or your LinkedIn profile? If you've got the stats, it's a big help. It might be an unpleasant help, i.e. you might have spent a long time trying to get people interested in you and it's still not working for you, but at least you know it's highly unlikely to be anything to do with you personally. It's almost certainly because your message is wrong. So then that's easy, because you do need to do something, and the more you delay that, the worse it gets. So do something. Second decision is, once having decided do I need to do anything or not, is actually, do you need to do something where you can fix it yourself, or do you seek professional help? That might be a slightly harder decision, but it's definitely better than not doing anything at all. Now, if you choose the first option, to do it yourself, combining what I've explained over the last couple of weeks is enough to make a big difference. That's already been proven. The chap who shall remain nameless for his own sanity, if nothing else, has already proven that. He went off and did something as a consequence of one of our webinars. It's made a big difference. So we know it works. But if you're not up to that, or you haven't got the time to do it, then I promise some good deals. So the final bit of tonight, other than answering your questions, are two offers. As I say, we can, for those people that just want their LinkedIn profile fixed, we can do that. Although economically, I have to say, unless you're absolutely super confident your CV is all right, it doesn't make much sense to just do the LinkedIn profile, because we have to spend as much time with you finding out what you've got to offer the world as we would if we were writing your CV as well. But if you just wanted the LinkedIn profile sorted, we ordinarily charge 150 quid plus VAT for that. You save some money on that this evening if you're interested. If, however, you want to go ahead and get your CV and LinkedIn profile sorted together, economically it's a more viable option. I mean, it costs more money, but it actually makes more sense and gets you better value. There's a great deal on that as well. And if you're interested in either of those, what you need to do is follow this link, which I will just copy and paste so that you can actually grab it. And sorry, just bear with me whilst I paste it. Very difficult to multitask at this time of night. So talking and pasting is not my strongest skill, but there you go. So if you just lift that link, if you're interested, click on the link. It will take you to a page on our website, and then you can use it to pay for either of those services. Very briefly, in both cases, it's a couple of hours on the phone with one of our writers. You get a writer who understands your marketplace. They're not going to outpoint you on the finer details of what you do, otherwise they'd be doing that, truth be told. But they'll know enough about what works and what doesn't to make a difference. And they'll build your message much more effectively, work with you to do exactly that, and normally turn it around within a 5-day working horizon. Then you're good to go and get into the marketplace. If you've, and this all applies to people with sort of 7 years more experience, if you've got less than 7 years experience, you probably need to approach us directly, because it's not fair you pay that kind of money. So there's an email address down the bottom of the screen. If you want to either visit our website or email us with any queries, then we'll help you. We'll even take a look at your current CV. If you're really still undecided as to whether you want to take the plunge or not, if you don't have the stats, probably the CV will come to me anyway. So I'll be able to take a look at it, assess it for how I think it fits against whatever career objectives you might have, and take a view, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. Those price offers, incidentally, run out week Monday. So for those people on the CV webinar, there's a bit of an extension because we decided to extend the deal for people who are obviously attending tonight's session. So runs until Monday, close of play Monday 17th, and then we revert to our standard prices. And for the first 10 people that order from tonight, you get also free cover letter, which is worth 36 quid, and a interview coaching package, which is worth about 60 quid, and is a really, really good interactive package where you can assess your interview skills at a basic level. Really nifty piece of kit, actually. So that's it for the session, and I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of it. The most important message is building the business case. Get that sorted makes a big difference. Second most important message is make a decision on whether you need help or not, or whether you need to do anything or not, and then at least you can act accordingly. I'll now move on to questions. So for those that need to leave, you're by all means welcome to leave. What you'll get automatically tomorrow morning at some stage is an email from us thanking you for your time and attention, a link to this evening's webinar if you want to watch it again, and make more notes. And as I say, if you need to contact us about anything to do with the offers, our services, how we might be able to help, then please just contact us, and we generally are here to help. So for those that need to go, thank you very much for your time and good luck. For those that have answered questions, just bear with me, and I will take a look right now at who's asked any questions, and then deal with them on a one-by-one basis. Now, it's the only fairest way is to deal with them literally in order. I don't think there have been a huge number tonight, so it shouldn't take too long. So I'll start at the beginning and work my way down. And just bear with me whilst I read some of these. Have you snapped me up while you can? Right, okay. I'm not going to mention full names, so anybody who's asked a question that's a bit sensitive, don't worry. I'm not about to blurt it out to everybody and for them to identify you. But Julia, I'm gathering that you've used snap me up whilst you can. I'm available for immediate start on my profile heading, and it's produced quite a bit of interest. Yeah, okay, that's a fair point, Julia. I mean, it's you can't. It's a bit like a CV. It's such a subjective area. I've known some people send a CV out to the market which has looked very creative, or literally, it used, in the olden days when it used to be printed CVs, you'd pull it out of the envelope and suddenly something would spring up on some kind of very creative message, get people noticed. You can never argue against people being a bit different and wacky, if you like, taking a slightly different approach. It sometimes can work. I'm not suggesting that you'll never get a job as a consequence of putting something in your professional headline that's a bit more punchy, but in the main, best practice is make people look at you and think, yeah, you're not on LinkedIn because it's a job board, even though they make most money from recruitment. The whole point of LinkedIn is not actually for it to be a job board as such. It's there to be a professional network, and by and large, now there's always exceptions to every rule, but by and large, a professional networking job, a professional networking site, or professional anything, is about being a bit more supple. And so for the majority of people, the best approach would be, take a look at me, look at my skills. If I'm of interest, you know what to do. That's the ideal psychological approach, if you like. It's a bit like people that go out with a billboard or appear on radio and say, look, I've been looking for jobs for 6 months. Here are my skills. Now, because they've got onto radio, all of a sudden they're getting calls from people. That's because nobody was aware of their message until that moment in time. They suddenly got a much higher profile. Now, if it works for you and you put a sort of a, please snap me up kind of message on your LinkedIn profile, well, then great. It's whether it actually, the thing I'd be interested in though, Julia, is whether it actually secured you anything yet, or it's too early to tell, because it could generate interest, but is that interest that actually leads anywhere would be my next interesting point. Lee, I'm a contractor who hasn't worked for a few months. How do I best present my current status, which is, of course, unemployed? Good question, Lee. If we're talking about LinkedIn, and to be honest, it probably equally applies to the CV, If you're an out-and-out contractor and you've got a reasonable history of being a contractor, then to be honest, it doesn't really matter. You don't want to be stating that you're currently unemployed. All you need to be reflecting is the last contract ran from X date to Y date. Depending on the rest of your history, if you've got an immaculate, seamless one contract to another contract to another contract to another contract, and now there's a bit of a gap, I still wouldn't worry about it, because you can't take away from the fact that you've had a very strong career background. But most contractors have gaps. Most contractors have either decided to take time out or have not had a seamless level of employment. So it's not such a big deal. But what I'd say to you in both CV and LinkedIn cases is build the business case as to why somebody should be interested in you before you get to the point at which you're saying, what are you actually, or what have you most recently done? You can't avoid the truth, but you can get the important message across first. Robert, is it worth spending the money on buying the premium membership for LinkedIn, or is the basic membership sufficient for most users? Good question. Broadly speaking, the basic membership is enough, unless you're particularly interested in who's been looking at your profile, or being able to use the credits you get to connect to other people and influence things. By and large, as a vehicle to be noticed by and to participate moderately with whoever you want to participate with, the basic membership is perfectly acceptable and is what most people have at the end of the day. There are no particular advantages in terms of your visibility from having the enhanced membership. Where enhanced membership starts to pay dividends is if you're actively seeking particular people you might otherwise find hard to connect with, or you want to leverage the search capabilities and the contact capabilities more for your own ends. So that depends a little bit on what you're up to. For somebody like me, for example, it's quite useful because I spend a lot of time trying to connect to businesses or recruiting groups or folk that might want to host webinars on a Wednesday evening in February to see if they might be keen to respond, and they tend to be harder to track down. Rayan, what do you use LinkedIn for? Okay, I'm assuming therefore, and you don't have a, oh, he's just left the building by the looks of it as well. So it's a bit of a broad question. I'll skip that one now as Rayan's left the building, save time, move on to some of the people. Michelle, I have two very different, this looks like a good one actually, yeah. I have two very different areas of experience. I'm not confident how to write my profile to get the message across that I am extremely versatile without it looking like I can't make up my mind. I was most recently a credit controller and also have and enjoy bar work. Oh wow, they are two different. I have had my own bar but would be looking for a bar manager's job. How should I tackle this? Yeah, that's a really good question and applies to quite a few people who wear different hats, sometimes at the same time. So my advice there, Michelle, as far as the CV is concerned, you need to position the CV with almost like a laser focus for each application. So if you're going, let's just say you were interested in credit control jobs at any time, that needs to be the business case through and through, because as soon as you deviate from that, people are going to get a bit worried, and you'll be competing against people with lots of that experience. So you don't want to look out of kilter with that. For the bar work, even though your most recent job was in credit control, you need to build a message that's all about that environment, because again, you'll be up against people who have done that most recently and maybe done it for 3, 4, 5, 10 years beforehand as well. So you need to load as much as you can on the, here am I, a valid applicant for this bar manager's job, I've got the appropriate skills, and almost incidentally, by the way, that wasn't my most recent job, but by the time they get there, hopefully they'll be thinking this person might be worth a punt. I think, as I say to so many people, you have to be realistic. You have to accept that. You can't change what's happened. It'll all come out in the wash anyway. So go to market with the strongest message you can for what you can justifiably claim, and it sounds like you've got enough experience, you enjoy it, therefore that will probably come across in terms of enthusiasm if you can get to interview. Your job on CV and LinkedIn has to be, get that message strongly across. Now, I know, unfortunately, we cost money. We're very used to doing that sort of thing, Michelle, genuinely. We deal with all sorts of people in all sorts of walks of life, some of which have wanted to make some dramatic changes. Now, we find that a bit easy. We can help you. So if you're genuinely interested in that or want to seek help, then maybe drop us a line on the email that I put on the bottom of this slide that's still showing, I think. Even just send me a CV and a bit of blurb, and I'll take a look at it and deal with it on a sort of a one-by-one basis. But it might well be that you need help to get that message across. Unfortunately, that bit costs money, but if you don't want to go down that route, then you just have to have a laser focus to both camps, call everything you can, strength-wise, from either skill area and go to market with that. You can't change the reality of who you've worked for, but you can build a strong business case before you get to your most recent employment, and that might help do the trick. Julia, I will update both my CV, thanks for last week, and my LinkedIn profile. I've just secured temporary position through an agency, looked at my LinkedIn profile and skills, blah, blah, blah. Use the summary as one, so it seems to work for me. Good, Julia, that sounds good. What happens if you had over 20 years experience in one job? That's a good question as well. It affects quite a few people. If it's the most recent job, Julia, again, it's about building the business case for what you want to do next. And if all of that experience is relevant for the next thing, then the way our CVs and LinkedIn profiles are structured, again, you can't change what's happened, but you don't have to tell people straight away, for example, where you've been working, which might infer, some people might look at that and think, oh, you know, she'll not change her mind, she'll be hard to mold into our organisation. You can't change that. If people think that, they think that. But you can, on paper, present a strong argument for why you'd be skilled to do whatever you're targeting if you've got the experience to back that up. If it's 20 years experience in one job is not your most recent thing, quite an interesting dynamic is I see a lot of CVs where people have done 20 years somewhere, then they've left and then done something for a year or 6 months or 9 months, and then something else for a few months, and then something. And you have to be a bit more careful about that, because that gives the impression, whatever the reasons, you know, and I'm stripping away the personality side of it. It's whatever the reasons, people look at it and think, ah, here's somebody who either was turfed out or took a risk and left a business after a long period of time, or it closed down or whatever, and then couldn't find the next move, and it's taken a while for them to get sorted. Now, some people are sympathetic to that, understand it. Some people, that is negative. Why, I don't know. They just do. So you have to be a bit sensitive about that. So it all, the devil's in the detail there, Julia. Pamela, how would you put in your profile that you've been a carer for the last 4 years? Okay. The facts that again is devil's in the detail. You have to be a bit careful, but it all depends on what skills and experience you've got to call upon from any point in your career that justifiably fit you well for the next thing you want to do. So there's quite a few people we've written CVs for recently who've had some very sensitive and personal issues going on. Honesty is the best policy as our general view, and to be honest, it strikes a positive chord with most people if you take that approach. So I would say, again, if it's something that you really do need to sort, talk to us, and we can maybe go through it in a little bit more detail and uncover some of the surrounding information and what you've got to offer the world and what you want to do going forwards. But again, it's building the business case. So ignore and try and escape from what's happened most recently or what's currently happening. Think, am I going for jobs? Do I want to get back into a marketplace for which I can actually legitimately lay a stake to? And build a business case as to why somebody should be interested in me for that work. And if you can do that, don't worry so much about the other stuff. There are ways to solve that. Maybe just come and talk to us. Julia, is it worth getting a premium account? By and large, Julia, I'd say no. You probably heard that answer earlier. Will I be able to get a copy of the slides? Yes. Your copy of this recording. Paul, won't mention your surname. Paul, he's left the building, but he's just updated his vanity URL. Much better. Excellent. Julia, thank you for sessions, tech onboarding. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Julia. And yes, it has, Julia, which I think means you're 20 years experience. Sorry, to others that I'm rambling, I know that. I'm just sort of reading these questions and comments. Yes, it has, last 20 years. So, Julia, yes, my comment is, it's don't worry about the amount of experience. Build the business case on your CV and your profile before you get to the point at which you're telling people where you've most recently worked. Just accept that for some people, all the stuff you've done should be seen as a strength. Most people probably will see it like that, particularly if you've got the skills and abilities they're interested in. There'll always be a few strange folk out there who'll think that you're beyond redemption and can't be moulded into whatever they intend for you because of your 20 years experience. And to be honest, they're probably not worth working for. So, you know, chalk that up to experience and focus on the things that you're good at and can offer the world. That's it in terms of questions by the looks of it. So I'll hang on for another 25, 30 seconds or so. But thank you again for your time for those who've hung on, and much appreciate the investment you've put in. Hope you got something out of it. You know, best of luck to those that we never speak with again. But for those that need help or think we might be able to help, by all means, just give us a call. That bit's for free, and we'll give you genuinely good free advice. What you do with it's your business. I'm just checking a few more questions. Okay, for those that just asked a couple of extra questions, I'll deal with them before I go, so don't worry. Appreciate your comments, Lee, thank you. P, I shall refer you to, you know who you are. I have over 20 years experience before I was a carer, and I would emphasize skills having acquired during that time. So 20 years. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, yeah, really good experience, relevant experience. You can't change what's happened. There'll be some people out in the marketplace who will always be obsessed with, yeah, but we want people who've, you know, done this job, they're doing it right now for a competitor or down the road, and anything less than that is not of interest. And for just accept that those people exist. And again, as I said earlier, I think to Julia there, for those people that are bothered by such stuff, then yeah, that's their business, that's their problem. But if you've got good experience in a particular field and you want to get back into that field, fortunately, there are plenty more people who, for a variety of reasons, are looking to get back into the marketplace. And by a variety of reasons, I mean everything you can imagine we've seen. So all we know is that there is a demand. There are some people out there, some employers actually, who are quite keen on bringing people with yeah, an unusual set of circumstances in, because they don't maybe carry the baggage that some people do, might not mess them around when it comes to sort of job offer time, or just want a different perspective. And so, yeah, build your business case on your CV. That sort of delays the point at which you're having to talk about the fact that you don't have recent work experience, and for some people that will be enough. They'll think, yeah, this person worth a bit of a punt. They seem to have something to offer the world. Is there any way to get CV webinar? Tommy, yeah, good question if you're on still, Tommy. What's the best way of doing that? Tommy, if you drop me an email to that info@CV, or just visit the website and click on the callback option, or get hold of us somehow and just say, I was on the LinkedIn Wednesday night thingy, 12th of Feb, could I have a link to the CV webinar? And either I or one of the guys in the office can send you a link, because I don't know what it is off the top of my head. It's buried away on a server somewhere. But I can get you a copy to the recording of last week's CV webinar. Yeah, no problem. And I think that does look like it's it now. So again, I'll hold on for another 20 seconds or so. And then if nobody else asks a question, I'll bid you all good night and sign off, and this thing will disappear off your screen. But I say I'll hold on for about 30 seconds just in case. To the rest of you, good night.